Howdy, I'm a Texas A&M student, and in 2016, God really got a hold of my heart, and this is my story of what He's done. So, like many Christian kids, I grew up in a Christian home, made a profession of faith very early on, but unfortunately, my family was trapped in the stumbling block of legalism. And legalism, at the root of legalism, is pride. And the pride just was the idea that I can reach up to God instead of God reaching down to me and helping me. So I can reach God through laws and good deeds and putting all kinds of restrictions on myself. And when I fail, I'm filled with guilt and shame and regret that just is overwhelming and just piles up throughout the years. So my family tried to be the most holy and perfect that it could on the outside, but on the inside it was very violent and abusive and was just not a Christian home at all, that no one ever saw because it was only on the inside. When I was very young, I recognized this inconsistency and hypocrisy, and I read the Bible hundreds of times, and so I found discrepancy, and I was like, this is not right. Like, we're not living for God. This isn't godly. And so I started to question, is God real? Are any Christians really sincere? Does God actually hear me when I pray? And if He does hear me when I pray, why is He not helping me? Why is He not answering me or coming to my aid or anything? So at about 8 or 9 years old, around that same time, I started to work to financially support my family. And then really soon after, we became homeless. And so we were staying in a hotel one day, and we had enough money to pay for the hotel, but not enough for food. And so my older sister one day just gathered us kids around and was like, well, we're going to pray for food. And I thought, this is ridiculous. Like, is God just going to drop food down from heaven? Like, is He really going to hear like the prayers of a few kids sitting in a circle, you know? So I faithlessly, reluctantly, just sat down, held hands and prayed with my siblings. And before we even got up off our knees, before we even finished praying, there was a knock on the door, and it was from another homeless man, and he was just holding out this giant sub sandwich at the door, and we were just like, what? And just right then, I was like, God's real. Like, He heard me, and like, He was answering my prayer, and He used someone who wasn't even a Christian at the time. And later, that man and his best friend cleaned up their lives, got off drugs, started going to church faithfully, and now one of them is married and living a beautifully wonderful, godly life, and it just illustrated to me how that even though we were failing miserably and I couldn't see God and I was faithless and just even doubting whether or not He existed, God still used our situation to bring that man to Christ and his friend. From then on, I knew, okay, God's real, but I still didn't see any evidence of it in any Christians around me. I still saw everyone as fake and hypocritical, and there's no telling whether or not they were, but it was just in me that was saying, okay, if we're not living this right, that means no one else is. And so I started to judge, and I started to look around all the people around me, and anytime I saw any sin or anything in them, I judged them and said, okay, you're not living the Christian life either. And so I started to search for one person who was actually sincere in following Christ and who really, really knew God. And just right in time, as soon as I became a teenager, God put this amazing family in my life. And they weren't perfect. Nobody's perfect. They had their mistakes, but it was the right person at the right time for God to show me that there are Christians, and He does desire to know His people, and He does reveal Himself to His people. And so that family was able to help and encourage me not to stray from my faith and to keep on track and just, keep going until God could get me to the next step. And my sisters also during that time were extremely encouraging. We all had our struggles, but we always seemed to, come in together with one another and pray and do anything and hold each other accountable, just to keep us on the right path. So it actually wasn't until I came to Texas A&M and I joined the BSM that God really started to show me what it was like to live the Christian life personally. For the first time, I started attending a Bible study where I was really studying the Bible, and I was encouraged to ask questions. And so I started to see some of the things that I had believing were lies. I started to look more critically at the Bible and reread what I had read 100 times, but with context. And so I started to read and realize that God's love was immense. You know what I mean? And he came for his people. We weren't just some creation who was just reaching out to God constantly. And we didn't have to sit and live in fear begging, for God, but that he came down to us. But I think God really started to move in my heart one night during BSM. The leader asked, are you righteous or are you a sinner? And he was going over the passage in Timothy. And my automatic response was, I'm a sinner saved by grace. And I wasn't entirely wrong. We are sinners saved by grace. But God was really trying to show me that I wasn't a sinner at all, that Christ had already washed me clean, and that I was righteous in God's eyes. I had been clothed by his righteousness, and no matter what I could do, I couldn't break out of that righteousness. None of my sin could corrode that righteousness around me. And so I was shocked, and I kind of, fought back just a tiny bit in my mind, like, wait, no, that's not right. Like, I can't be righteous. I'm just a horrible, horrible person. So that weekend, I sat down with a blank piece of paper, and I took up my Bible and that paper, and I very literally said, I am starting with a clean slate. I am not going to believe anything that I've ever been taught, all of these lies that I've been held to, all of this guilt, all of this shame, all of this emotions that I keep going through to try to be better and be good and be holy, and putting more restrictions on myself that I just keep failing at. I'm going to put that all aside, and I'm going to look at what the Bible says directly and nothing else. And my paper started with, God is my creator, and then it went all the way through and ended with, Christ came to forgive me. And for the first time ever in my entire life, I literally felt the burden of guilt and shame lifted. It was like as if I had been holding on to something that I couldn't hold on to, and it was just ripping through, and I just let it go. And I was like, God, I can't be perfect. This is not what you desire for me. You created me, you loved me, you made me in your image, and you saved me, and you died for me, and I'm a child of God now. And that song, after, a few months later, just like breaking free of all of the rules and everything that I'd been attached to for so long and held on to, that song really became my anthem, is I'm a child of God. Like, I had never been able to confidently say that before. And it immediately created this desire in me to go and share. I had to tell somebody. I ran to my sister immediately, who had, a bit earlier already come to the conclusion of, I'm a child of God and I'm forgiven. And I came to her and I was like, I finally figured it out. Like, God really, really showed me. And ever since then, it seems like every time I hit a struggle, every time I hit a roadblock, or every time I hit anything that's really hard, which we do in life, of course, I'm able to look back, and I'm able to look on that path that God showed me, and see that in the moment I had no idea what God was doing. I didn't even know that I was searching, and yet God lit that little light in front of me to be able to show me the next step. And I can have encouragement, and I can have joy knowing that God's got the next steps as well, and he's going to show me just in time what the next steps are, and he's going to carry me all the way through, because I'm a child of God.
So freaking good. So just one quick question. If you don't mind sharing, what were some of the legalistic things that your family put on you? What were some of the things that you believed that weren't true?
Yeah. So one of the biggest things that kind of held me was the appearance. And of course, I do not condemn anybody who has these personal convictions. If you have the personal conviction, I'm completely okay with it. But it was the way that I had done it. And it was that we were always to wear dresses or skirts, and we weren't to cut our hair. And this became kind of a cloak of righteousness. And so to me, it was like the Pharisees in Jesus' day, who had to have this outward show of their Christianity and their belief. And it wasn't an inward heart thing. It wasn't a sincere belief. It was just a show. And if I didn't have that skirt or that dress, or I didn't have long hair, how were people to know that I was a Christian? And once I came to the realization that it was a heart thing, and God desired my heart, then I was able to look around and see that that this is the stumbling block that all religions have placed upon themselves, to try to make an outward show of their religion and place all these restrictions on themselves. And as I passed by other people who were struggling with the same things, I was able to relate to them, and I was able to see that I was doing the same thing that they were. I still remember the very first time I put on pants and I was so scared. I was like, even knowing that I was free, I still was scared because I was like, I just don't know, how this is gonna work. And I started to doubt. I was like, how are people gonna know I'm a Christian if I'm not, wearing the Christian clothes, And then a few weeks in, one of the people came by and were like, oh, we know her, she's a Christian. And I was shocked. I was like, how did you know I was a Christian? I'm not even wearing a skirt, what? And then there was the real realization of, wow, it really does show when you really, really believe and when you really are sincere about your faith. It doesn't matter what, you have on the outside or anything like that. You still need to be respectful of, everything that God's given you, but God really desires your heart.
Thank you so much for watching our Behold video series. We are so excited to see how God uses these videos to glorify His kingdom. So if you have a story, or if you know other people who have a story, please feel free to contact me at this email address because we would love to hear how God has changed your life.